from the worker. So but it's also true that when women when within this developmental discourse in Kerala, when the women started organizing as the Kudumbashri members or as Asha workers, or when they started coming out to do the job as Anganwadi workers, they also had they over the spaces outside the household were open to them, so they had this access to the spaces outside the household. They also had networks outside the household which they were able to capitalize to some extent. So you can see that greater number of women candidates coming at the panchayat level elections, but we don't see the same numbers. We don't see that this progression coming to the, when we come to the elections at the state level, at the legislative assembly elections or the parliament elections, but it is confined to the one. So we don't see women leaders coming at the from the panchayat progressing as political leaders at a state or national level. And so what does this actually mean? And there is another question also. So one thing is that the burden of the developmental labor falls on the shoulder of the women. They are not being recognized for that, nor are they being remunerated. And another fallout of the situation is that women who had to bear the burnt of the patriarchy within the household now has to bear the burnt of public patriarchy or patriarchy at the bureaucratic level. So they do all the work, but at the same time uh, they are not considered as knowledge producers. These are for the last 20 to 25 years, women as asha workers and kudumbashri members have been involved in the developmental activities in Kerala, and through this constant activity they also has amassed a a vast area of knowledge regarding the governance, regarding management, regarding development. But still they are not, their knowledge is not taken into consider. They are not considered as the knowledge bearers of the about development. Still the knowledge bearers are the bureaucrats and the technocrats or academicians like us. So we dictate the terms and they carry out. So as it was said by Andrea Cornwall, what happens is that women is working for the development and rather than development working for the women. So this all this empowerment and development agenda has not actually benefited the women. So the only transition that has happened is from the household level patriarchy, they now also have to like they also have to bear the burden of the public patriarchy as well, with a limited kind of mm, benefits in between. This does not I don't mean to say that the women and the grassroots level women Kundmashri members are uh, are uh, are accepting this situation without any resistance or protest. We have seen like number of protest and resistance that is taken out by the asha workers or Kundmashri workers at the state level and at the national level, demanding for more fair wage systems, more durable wage systems, more acceptance of their work. So they are resisting like overtly in the public as well as very supportively in their daily activities as well. So that is happening, but still on the agenda of gender equality that is being promised by the state and the developmental agencies by UN or is being subverted due to this lack of, that's what I meant in the earlier by about making structural inequality, by addressing the structural inequalities. The structure of women's subordination that is there in the social system is continuing, And in top of that, without changing, without addressing those structural questions, when empowerment is given as a sort of tool, then what happens is what Andrea Cornwell said about making women work for the development rather than making development work for the women. And in addition to that, there is another another example, another very powerful example is the question of women's indebtedness. Like if you take the question of women's indebtedness in Kerala, we can see that now, like after all these years of talking about gender inequality, empowerment, and now all agencies are ready to give loan to women. Now all agencies are ready to give loan to women and only to women. That's what is happening at the real. So women in Kerala are becoming more and more indebted, and that becomes much more serious in the context of COVID also. That's not just in Kerala. For example, Seema Bhaskar, who's working in an RLM in Chhattisgarh, was talking about how the migrant laborers who are coming back from other cities of India like Bombay or Bangalore or even Kochi, once they reach their house, uh, the income, an assured sort of income is lost to them. And now the situation has reached to such an extent that they have started pawning their like household utensils, and the money lenders which they have successfully kept away from those regions for sometimes is coming back once again. So they are coming back, and this loan taking trap, debt trap, is once again starting to make its presence in our rural areas. So in that situation, when this burden of taking the loans and repaying loans falls on the shoulder of the women, and so they becomes doubly trapped within the household, because in order to repay the loan, she will require the uh, require the participation and require the help of others within the household, as well as her friends and neighbor who are members of the Kudumbashri and other micro credit unions. So this means that all the traditional ties, all the patriarchal ties which has been holding women or making her situation worse, will have greater hold uh, um, on the situation of the women, their social aspirations, their ability to move, their mobility. So everything is going to be going to get constrained. So the COVID has long term effects on the situation of the women. For one thing, they are exposing women to greater risk, uh, um, health risk, because they are the care workers. The second thing is they get trapped into such long term bindings of the patriarchy at the community and how neighborhood levels also. So that is not just for women. Like another news that was coming up during the COVID time, as was pointed out by Dr. Jilly, is that the COVID pandemic has become a pandemic of violence and abuse. So that is not just against the women, but also against many other vulnerable groups within the household. So it can be old age people, it can also be young people, and it's also true for the case of transgenders. uh, like many of the government was asking the people to go back to their household. So which raises which raises the question, which household do we return to? So like people who had to leave households for different reasons, that can be due to their selections on their gender identity or sexual identity, can be due to different, like the social construction of morality and immorality, different reasons. People who had to move out of the house had to come back to the houses once again and suffer all the indignities that had led them uh, to leave the household in the first place. So there is there has been suicides during this COVID period. There has been numerous kind of abuses which transgenders and genders belonging to the gender minority or sexual minority groups had to suffer, which they can't they are which they were also not able to come out and tell in a public. So they had to suffer all these things silently. And another related issue that came up during this COVID period was also about the housing rights. Most of the people were focusing on the housing rights of people living on the street, and their condition was also very serious. Like people living on the on the street required immediate attention due to regarding the housing rights. But what about the housing rights of a young woman? Housing rights of a young woman who had to leave the house, or a transgender who had to leave the house. So the safe.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, your audio is mute. Reshma, ma'am. Ma'am, your audio is mute. Please, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Is it like, has it been mute for a long time now?
No, ma'am, just now only. Ma'am, you
Okay.
continue.
Okay, yeah. So the house, and so another point that was thrown up by the COVID pandemic was the issue of housing rights of younger women, of the transgenders, of sexual minority women. All these issues should also be taken up immediately, with immediate attention. If the pandemic situation is going to continue, uh, which means that we have to turn attention to these issues also. So they need to have safer places where they can live with dignity, make their demands with the dignity, and also build up a community of care and love around them. So that also becomes very crucial in the situations of the COVID. And so so all these things point out that we have to address the basic structural issues, so that what is known as strategic gender interest shows that we have to address the underlying power equations. And it's not just a matter of higher income. It's not just a matter of having, like, even the matter of having more participation also means that we have to topple the existing power structure in order to address these exclusions, or in order to have inclusive development with gender inequality. We have to talk about the underlying power structure that set apart certain groups, or how certain groups are locked out of participation in the social life, and also the production of disadvantage through the active dynamics of the social interaction. So for example, Nancy Fraser put forward different forms of exclusions. She says that it's a conceptual framework, that it's a conceptual spectrum that on the one hand of which is the primarily economic forms of exclusion, and at the other end cultural forms of exclusion, and in between you have like different sort of combinations of exclusions that can happen. So the economic forms of exclusions, for examples, will deal with exploitation, which means the appropriation of one's labor and the fruits of labor. Or it can also mean marginalization, which means that exclusion from the means of livelihood, or confinement to the poorly paid or undesirable form of work. And it can also be deprivation, which means that we being denied of an adequate standard of living. Whereas the culture, on the other hand, this is on the one hand economic forms of exclusion, and on the other hand, the cultural or social forms of exclusion can stem from the social patterns of representation. It can from the social patterns of interpretation and communication, and these are manifested in ways in which the dominant groups invisibilize or seek to impose the dominant values, or routinely devalue and disparage certain categories of people. So that poor as a category cannot be solely defined by their lack of adequate material possessions and economic disadvantages and the distributional uh, patterns of the society, but they also mm, uh, are objected to derogatory ways, and they also, or they often face various forms of social discrimination that can be seen across like gender spectrum. And so for example, like if a woman is having AIDS, or a transgender or a sex worker is having AIDS, like different kind of cultural disadvantages which is associated with the despised identities, and uh, accrue on on the identity of those people who are so socially ostracized, and uh, and in turn it also accompanies different sort of economic discrimination. So female sex workers are often say that the state uh, ask us to leave this job and enter into another job, but once it is known that we are sex workers, then many other job opportunities are denied to us. So it's a form of it's not so there's we can't like create very clear distinctions between economic exclusions and cultural exclusions, because often both of them go hand in hand, and create hybrid sort of exclusions, which is known as the bivalent exclusions, which is that is which lies between these economic bivalent exclusions are those exclusions which lie between the economic exclusions and the cultural forms of exclusion, and the gender exclusions are often bivalent sort of exclusions. So for the like in order to address the economic exclusions, we can demand for redistribution of wealth, redistribution of other resources in the society. In order to address the issue of cultural exclusion, we can demand we can demand to like mobilize around the identity. We can demand for recognition. We can demand that uh, the gendered identities are very valid identity, and they should be recognized as such. So women should not be asked to be like a man, or the transgender should not be asked why he or she is like this. Why can't you turn your gender to the other more acceptable sort of gender form? So there should be a recognition of the identities of different groups. So there should be a recognition of diversity. That's what the cultural exclusion, like the like how can we address the cultural exclusion is by recognizing the diversity and recognizing the rights of different citizens to exist as different. So and the bivalent exclusions, how do we address these bivalent exclusions? To address the bivalent exclusions, that is most like gender exclusions are also most often bivalent exclusions. So in order to address the bivalent exclusions, we also need to address both the redistribution issues of economic injustices, and as well as the recognition or identity or diversity issues of exclusions. And only when we combine these two can any fruitful sort of strategy to combat the gender exclusion will emerge. And in order for that strategy to emerge, so like just by saying that we should be conscious about these two like streams of exclusion, that is cultural and economic. It also requires the development professionals and the state and the government to be attentive to the discourses that is being raised by the different minority group, different gendered groups also. So like as I told before, Kudumashri members and Asha workers are also agitating in order to uh, turn their situation. So we have to listen to what they are saying, and there should be a democratic dialogue, and also a democratic expansion of the public sphere, democratic expansion of the public sphere, so that these people are not uh, deployed to bear the burden of the development labor, but they have their stake in the public sphere as rightful citizens. So a right based strategy to combat the inequality and combat exclusion is necessary at this point of time. A right based strategy which is attentive to the differences and diversity of demands of the different gender groups, a right based strategy which recognize the labor and the right to participate in the developmental civil society or public, or in to have the civil society which encompasses not just the development labor, but also the other kind of work, other kind of civil society participation for the women. A right based approach that looks into different needs of different populations, whether it is housing, whether it is health, or whether it is the need for cultural expression. All these should come together in order to address the issues of gender exclusion and inclusive development. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really enlightening and thought provoking talk on gender aspects, even the contribution of women during this pandemic period. Not only women, but other community also. So let's not wait much to hear from Ms. Petra Lovasic, Social Work Administrator at Center for Social Welfare and Secretary Professional, Association of Social Workers in Rijeka, Croatia. I'm delighted to welcome you, ma'am, who has joined us from another part of the world to share her insights on overcoming gender disparities and international perspective. I request you, ma'am, to take over this platform to address it in ease. Looking forward. Over to you, ma'am.
Good day, everyone. Does everyone hear me well?
Yes, ma'am. You can continue.
Okay. I just wanted to ask for the option of screen sharing. Can that be managed? I prepared a presentation, so I would like you to see.
Okay, ma'am. So I think, can you share that slide now to one of our mail ID?
I am in screen sharing, but it says that host disabled participant screen sharing, so I cannot share the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. It's only possible for host. That's a problem. Hello, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Well, if that's not possible, never mind. Let's begin. First, I want to thank you. Oh, what's that?
Ma'am, is okay? Is it okay, ma'am?
Yeah, it's okay. Somebody just.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So first, I wanted to say hello to everyone, and I want to thank you all for this opportunity. I am saying hi from Croatia, from Rijeka. My name is Petra Lovasic, for anybody who didn't catch that. And I'm a social worker. I work in a social care center, or as you would say, Center for Social Welfare in Rijeka. I did my master's in social policy, so I am interested in these subjects that we are going to talk about soon. And the other thing I would.
Excuse me, ma'am.
What?
Ma'am, can you please check now whether you can share or not?
Oh, you made me the co-host. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Is that visible now?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay,
coming up.
okay, good. Just let me. I'm not in a. Okay. Um, the other thing I was trying to say before was that I'm also a secretary at our Professional Association of Social Workers here in Rijeka. And when it comes to that, I also want to thank my friend and colleague Andrea Balash, who actually connected me with Dr. Jilly John, who I also want to thank very much for this. And finally, we can start with the subject. So the theme of my session is overcoming gender disparities in an international perspective. First, well, with what this story starts is the difference between sex and gender. I won't be long about that. We all know the differences about the biological and physiological characteristics that define us as female or male, not exclusively, since we know that some people have both. But it usually defines us as female or male. The problem starts with gender and gender expression because gender is a social category and it is defined by a social context in which we live. So there we have terms as gender expression and gender identity, which is something that we deeply feel internally, and it is just a minute, something's wrong. Oh, oh. And that is something that we express personally, and that is our internal and individual expression. And our gender identity does not necessarily need to correspond to the sex that is assigned to us at birth. The main problem that actually generates the gender disparities we are going to talk about is the discrimination that is sex and gender based, and that is actually the origin of the problem that we are going to talk about. So when it comes to gender discrimination, today we have the Istanbul Convention as a crucial document and the start of a certain policy towards fighting gender discrimination. It is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I just wanted to say that it defines gender discrimination as any distinction, exclusion, or restriction that is made on the basis of sex, which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on the basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. Discrimination can stem from both law and from practice. Our Istanbul Convention recognizes both. The Euro discrimination, some example that in some countries, for example, the law states that women who marry foreign men are going to lose their citizenship and property rights. On the other hand, that is not the case for men. That is something that just derives from law and is just, a practice that is done. And the de facto discrimination, that is discrimination in practice. So we can see, and that is something that we can compare to immigration policies and immigration practices that we are all facing with refugee situations today. Some immigration officials in various countries find a woman who is traveling alone with her minor children suspicious, while men who are traveling with their children are seldom questioned. There we come to gender disparities. The other term that we are using more often here in our context, European, Western, and Croatian as well, is gender inequality. We have to emphasize that in virtually all societies, women are in an inferior position to men. So when it comes to gender disparities, we define them as differences in women's and men's access to resources, status, and well-being. And those differences usually favor men and are unfortunately often institutionalized through law, justice, and social norms. About law, we saw earlier on previous slide. When it comes to gender inequality, it is important to say that legal, social, and cultural situation in which sex and or gender determine different rights and dignity for women and men is a situation of gender inequality. And that has unequal access to or enjoyment of rights primarily as a direct consequence. Here is one citation I wanted to point out because I find it very interesting in terms of gender inequality and gender disparities. It says that gender inequality is not perpetuated exclusively through differential access to and control over material resources. That gender norms and stereotypes reinforce gendered identities and constrain the behavior of women and men in ways that lead to inequality. They're trying to say, the author Ridgway is trying to say that it's not just something that we see in actual concrete stuff as material resources, access, situation on the labor market, something that we face every day in our societies. But it's important to emphasize that they are actually that is actually something that we unconsciously behave on because we are internalizing norms and stereotypes that are all around us, and our behavior is then leading to inequality. For example, I mean, I know many women as my professional colleagues or my friends who just act as if these stereotypes and prejudice is something normal, and they laugh at it, and it's funny. So that is something that is also a problem in our societies. What is actually a cause and a consequence of gender discrimination? That's gender-based violence. Here we can diversify two terms, and I will explain why two terms. It's gender-based violence, as violence directed against a person because of its gender identity, or gender expression. And that has a direct consequence of, lesser and lower position of that person in terms of all the participation in the society. And why we actually use the term gender-based violence against women. As you all probably know, most gender-based violence is inflicted on women and girls by men. It is a percent of like 90 plus, that we are all familiar with these statistics. And that is why it is important to highlight that fact. Um, Also, many forms of violence against women are rooted in power inequalities between women and men. Some power inequalities were emphasized in the earlier session, so I won't be detailing about it. But it is definitely a position of power that makes men do certain acts of discrimination and violence against women. Here is some European statistics on it. As you can see, gender-based violence is more common than we all think. These are the data from European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights Research, year 2014. The situation hasn't much changed today. Um, the statistics are catastrophic, I have to say. 1 in 3 women has experienced physical and or sexual violence. 1 in 2 women has experienced sexual harassment. 1 in 20 women has been raped, and 1 in 5 women has experienced stalking. And it is also important to point out that 95% of victims trafficked for sexual exploitation in the EU are women and girls. Um, as we said before, the majority of victims are women and girls. And that is why we have to admit that it is a deeply rooted thing. It's a phenomenon that is deeply rooted in gender inequality. And gender-based violence against women continues to be one of the most notable human rights violations within all societies in this world. It's important to point out as well that based on hierarchical and unequal structural power and relations rooted in cultural related gender norms is what makes this problem even greater. This definition is actually trying to highlight the fact that violence against women is based on gender, that is a result of the historical power imbalance between women and men, and that we have to make that more visible. And it tries to capture the oppressive pattern of coercive control, which deprives women of fundamental freedoms. These are some global statistics by the World Health Organization. And here we arrive to one more form of gender-based violence, and that is intimate partner violence. Here we see that 38% of all murders of women are committed by their intimate partners. 1 in 3 experience physical or sexual violence by a partner. That is something that is important to emphasize, because we can see that this is actually very problematic, because we usually think that people, or I can say men, who commit acts of sexual violence, rape, murders, are some strangers, that women are raped by some strangers somewhere in the woods, but that's not the real situation. The real situation is that men by whom women are raped and who act violently against them are usually their intimate partners. We also have data that there is a large percent of men who are family member to women they have been sexually abusing. their fathers, their stepfathers, their grandpas, etc., etc., their uncles, and that is a very sad statistic that we have persons who should be of trust and confidence to these women and girls, and they are actually abusing them. One data that made me shocked because I wasn't aware of that percent, that it was that high, is that up to 45% of adolescent girls around the world report that their first sexual experience was forced. That also shows that men exploit the position of power, and that they usually feel like they have the right to use force. I have to share something with you. It's a book. The author is Lonnie Bancroft. The book is called Why Does He Do It? And it's about professional counselor who actually works with men who commit sexual violence. And he actually wrote a book about his experiences and work with them. And his conclusion is that it is actually a matter of upbringing of our men. And they are actually we send them a message, their mothers and their fathers, their families, people who participate in their upbringing are sending them a message that they have the right to use force. And we actually have a consequence that they see a woman as their something that they own. And that is a crucial factor that is that makes them do things that they actually see as non-problematic. I already mentioned the Istanbul Convention, which has started to recognize gender-based violence in its true form once again. And it is important to say that it recognizes 4 key forms of gender-based violence. In the table here, you can see all 4 of them. But what I have to point out is that that convention has set some crucial points in fighting, combating intimate partner violence. And it has pointed out the problem of structural or institutional violence, and that is the subordination of women in all spheres of life, economic, political, social. This is some data on intimate partner violence and its cost. The European Institute for Gender Equality, which I'm going to say something about later, in its research estimates that it costs us around 109 billion euros per year when it comes to the support that victims of intimate partner violence need after they survive it. Gemma Abbott, one activist for women's rights, has made a poster, in which she noted 5 ways to end gender-based violence. As you can see, it consists of empowering girls and women, changing gender norms and social attitudes, raising awareness globally, educating boys and men, and transforming our judiciary systems. I already pointed out the fact of the need to educate boys and men and to upbring them differently. So I have to say I agree with her in many ways. I won't be talking much about COVID-19 situation. The coronavirus was a theme in the previous session. So I will just present some data that is that we are familiar with already, and that is that the most important consequence is that domestic violence has intensified. Uh, Here in Croatia, we don't have some concrete data about it, but here you can see some numbers. For example, for France and United Kingdom, United States, and some other European countries, as well as Latin America. And that is that this is like around 30% more, there is 30% more violence. And of course, it's not a surprise to us because women were forced to be with perpetrators in their homes, and it was very hard for them, even harder to ask for help and support. Um, I have to emphasize something that is actually very strange when it comes to Croatian situation. Our Ministry of Internal Affairs has issued a statement that there are no changes and that there isn't significant growth in domestic violence cases. Or all our NGOs, our civil society organizations who work with violence victims have stated that that is not the case and that is a lie. So that has been a great issue for all of us social workers working in institutions who have to support and do something about it. When it comes to institutions and policies that are combating gender disparities and inequalities, United Nations Development Program is one of them. Gender equality is actually a fifth sustainable development goal to achieve gender equality and to empower all women and girls. United Nations also have a gender equality strategy that they are working on in hard cooperation with UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women. It's an amazing entity that does so many great things. You can research more if you wanna. I got some links and the references later. These are just some information about global gender gaps. I won't be reading them all, but you can see that we are less paid. The difference is like 23%. Our unpaid care work is 18%, like 11% larger than for men. And when it comes to physical and sexual violence, there are actually no information, no data for men. When it comes to EU, this is a gender gap that, even though more women graduate from universities, they earn on average 16% less than men do. And only 8% of CEOs of the EU's largest companies are women. That tells us exactly how we don't participate enough in public offices, in labor market. On the European level, besides European Commission and Council of the European Union, Council of Europe, it is important to mention European Institute for Gender Equality as an autonomous body of the European Union. It is settled in Vilnius in Lithuania, and it is actually established to contribute to and strengthen the promotion of gender equality. It is actually it's one of its main work areas is actually gender mainstreaming in all EU policies and resulting national policies. Because gender-based violence and all these before mentioned statistics and data and our international situation when it comes to gender inequality has made the systematic consideration of the differences between the conditions, situations, and needs of women and men in all policies and actions. And it's a primary task to be performed in all our policies, because we have to integrate the gender perspective into preparing, designing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating policies, regulatory measures, and programs. Because we have to infiltrate a view to promote equality between women and men and to combat discrimination. Some positive measures in our
Excuse me,
policies. Yes?
can you hear me? Can you be just a little bit louder? Because I think,
Louder.
yes, yes.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Let me just.
I
Okay, is this
can hear
better?
you clearly, but I think the other people had a problem. So I hope
Well,
it's.
let me just see. Just a minute. Am I louder now?
I think you are.
Because
Okay,
I can't just, I'm sorry. Let me just.
Petra, now we can hear you properly and more clear.
Because I ain't getting notifications. I'm sorry. Let me just.
It's okay. You go ahead.
Okay, where was I? And okay. Just a minute. Can you hear me now? I'm not.
Yes, Petra, you can continue.
Okay, good. Because something was breaking in my connection. Okay, and finally, I've arrived to the Croatian context, and I want to shortly present our legislative framework, and then I'm going to be talking about some important initiatives for combating gender-based violence and fighting for gender equality. In Croatia, we actually have two important laws. Those are Act on Gender Equality and the Anti-Discrimination Act. And they have set some important institutions that are working on gender equality. In Croatia, we have a parliamentary committee for gender equality, and that is a body that is actually, one of the governmental bodies as well as the Governmental Office for Gender Equality. And they serve for the implementation of activities that are actually stated in our national gender equality policy, which, by the way, we need to make a new one. An independent body for combating discrimination in the area of gender equality is our gender equality ombudsperson, our ombudswoman for gender equality, which does the main job in this area. The Gender Equality Act has also made coordinators in public bodies and commissions for gender equality as some institutions that should be promoting gender equality on local and regional levels as working consultative bodies. Okay. Well, in Croatia, there are actually a lot of, we can say, little initiatives that are a result of the struggle for overcoming the gender disparities, and I couldn't mention all of them, but I did mention a few, and they are actually doing, in my opinion, great work in fighting this in our society. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. I actually tried to translate it in English, but it was it was a bit hard. Somehow I managed, so it will be easier for you to understand. There is a Facebook page on everyday sexism, misogyny, hate speech, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and all forms of discrimination. That actually analyzes the most creation portals and are the ones who started it. But it is now led by Center for Civil Initiatives 4H. It is important to say that they actually constantly analyze articles in our media, and they are raising awareness on sexism as and all forms of gender discrimination that we are actually, most of us, not even aware of. You can check it out on Facebook, and you can see that actually a lot of women are surprised by what is sexism. It is something that we meet in our everyday life, and we are not even aware because a lot of us consider it humoristic and something that isn't actually so relevant. The other initiative is Initiative Save Me. And the initiative Save Me has, in cooperation with Foundation for Human Rights and Solidarity in Croatia, Solidarity, has actually, founded a fund that is also named Save Me. And it is actually a fund that is supposed to take care of domestic violence victims to provide them with emergency care and protection when all institutions fail. Um, there were some controversies about it in our society, but they actually managed to do some changes, and those changes were also visible and enacted in our legislative framework. So enact on protection from domestic violence as one more act that is dealing with this subject in Croatian law and in our criminal law. They were actually emphasizing the importance of the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, saying that violence is not something that should stay within our four walls, within our family, because it is a public matter. And they were actually very, very successful, and some, celebrities of ours in Croatia were a part of it, and they actually managed to do some relevant changes. Um, Proud Zagreb is actually a very new initiative. I only found about it a few days ago on Facebook, of course. Our social networks are a pretty good source of these. Proud Zagreb, I don't know if any of you is familiar with the Zagreb earthquake that happened in March. And consequences were very hard on the city, and the damage is still not being coped with in an appropriate way. As the COVID pandemic and the consequences of the earthquake, um, it all has significantly limited visibility and support of LGBTIQ plus population, as in the area of Zagreb and in the entire Croatia. So they are actually fighting to prevent the trend of restricting their rights, reducing their representation in public and media. They are fighting the fact that they're not being financed as they used to be before. So it is even harder now for them to work and to act and to help. So they have actually, formed an informal group of LGBTIQ activists, and they are, preparing a series of activities to combat this negative trends that are occurring. And something more, and that is actually one interesting campaign. Here in Croatia, elections are, like in 10 days. And our politicians have actually made a question of women's rights and women's uteruses and abortion rights a topic, and like the most mentioned subject in this campaign at the moment. Our Center for Education Advisory and Research, which also leads the aforementioned blog, Libella, are actually engaging a campaign for the rule of women's right to choose. It is called Why Are We Silent? Because Ipsos made research here in Croatia in 2019 about opinions of citizens on abortion and women's rights to choose. And the results were that 81% of citizens think that a woman has a right to choose, that a woman has a right to choose what to do with her body, that a woman has a right to make an abortion if she wants to, and that that is only her decision. And what is actually contradictory is that we are, you know, that most of us think so, and we think that we are a minority. And this campaign has also pointed out the fact that basic health protection and health rights are not available for women in Croatia because gynecologists are refusing to provide medical services such as abortions. It is important to say that in 2017, when our court has ruled that we have to make a new law on abortion because the old one is too old. There was an initiative which is called Platform for Reproductive Justice, where certain medical workers have, organized and are fighting for the improvement of the existent law and against prohibitions that some radical organizations and associations here in our society are trying to, pull. And I think that I've come to an end, yeah. First, I wanted to thank you all for your attention. And I just wanted to say a few words when it comes to our role as social workers, as our profession. I'm actually working in a center for social welfare. I work with adult population and with the elderly. But I have to say that we also have a very important role in fighting for gender equality and combating gender-based violence and domestic violence. What has come of these initiatives, for example, Save Me, the problem is that institutions are not answering the problem as they should be. And the main cause for all of that is that there isn't enough of us professionals, that there isn't enough of social workers in institutions. We got too much work, we got too much cases, the normatives are just enormous. And we would really want to do our job properly, but we just can't because our work conditions are actually not ensuring us and are not motivating us for a better work, for commitment to these crucial issues. I think that's about it. Now I'm going to stop screen sharing and go to chat to see your comments and questions. But first I have to see how to get back. Just a minute. Okay. Okay. I can see some of you. Okay, I'm back. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. And you have really gave a widespread statistics and to think over gender and its inclusive approach. So I think before moving on to the open forum for discussion, I would like to remind you about the registration form and feedback form. Link is available in the chat box. Please do register via the given link, and certificates will be provided for those who register. Who watches while live on YouTube, please do send your mail ID in live chat box. Registration link will be sent to your mail ID. So thank you. And yes, time is up for introduction. Interaction. Anybody from the attendees can unmute yourself and ask your queries with the resource person, or else you can put up your questions in the chat box. We have a limited time of almost 45 minutes. So participants kindly bear with us and try to keep up the time. Attendees, please notify in chat box to call out your name for your queries. Then I think you can unmute yourself and ask a question. So anybody there for the interaction? Please kindly unmute yourself and ask the questions to ma'am. You can ask question to both the resource persons, and you can just notify which resource person you want to ask to, and then we can have the interaction.
Hello.
Yes, Sanak.
Hello.
Yes, continue. You're audible. Is there anybody online? Yeah, continue.
Yeah, this is Anas here.
Yes, continue.
Yeah, my question is to Reshma, ma'am. Madam, thank you for your informative session for the first place. Now, my question is that Kerala is the only state in India which has come out with a proper. Is Reshma here? Hello?
I think your audio is breaking. So can you just text your question in the chat box so that I will read it out?
My question is that Kerala is the only state which has come up with a proper gender budgeting for all the gender minorities as well as all citizens of the state for in general. But during this COVID-19 pandemic, it is a fact that all the rights of the gender minority, for instance, gender, transgender people or intersex people have left their houses, were not given proper treatment, like has faced sexual violences and all sorts of violences, for instance, domestic violences even. So why hasn't the state, be it central government or the state government, what can be done to protect them, or how can the proper gender budgeting be done during this health emergencies or during any sort of crisis? Am I audible? Hello?
You are,
Yeah, can I answer?
yes, ma'am. Continue.
Mm, thanks for that question. Like what you said is very right. That at the beginning of the pandemic, there was an attempt by the state government to address the issues of transgenders. So the state governments were trying to locate the transgenders through the different transgender boards. They were trying to give like food and other essential materials, but the problem is that often the kind of attempts that is taken by the state are like addressing the what we call as a practical gender in interest. So that practical gender interest are that which sprungs from your daily life requirement. You don't have food, and even within the practical gender interest, state kind of creates a hierarchy. So those which can be easily address, like for example food. So you give a food packet and then you give once food packet once, and then the state has gained the name that it has addressed the requirements of the transgenders. Whereas there is not just the practical other practical gender interest, like what you said, the housing, which requires a long term planning by the state, and much thorough interventions are like are given a backstage. Whereas the other gender interest, what we call as the strategic gender interest, which is very crucial, because those strategic gender interests are what actually enables or empower the women uh, to put a stop to the all gender based violences, or like to any other gender category, which helps them to, which empowers them, which brings them to the center stage of development. So the strategic gender interests are ignored. So that was why I was talking in the beginning that when we talk about giving credit to women and giving financial independence to the women and having more women based micro credit system, we ended up actually making women uh, part of the debt trap. So just by so the same thing happens with the transgender community also. There are transgender boards here, but whether the government actually consider gender, whether it is that's of women or men or transgender or sex workers, whether the government actually consider them part of the governance system, so they can be, their voices can be heard within the governance system. And as you said, the gender budgeting, gender analysis, like Kerala, the Kerala governance policy actually talks about gender analysis and gender budgeting. But the truth of the matter is that we haven't done any gender budgeting or gender analysis for any of our projects, or for any of our like yearly plans. So these just remains as headings under the governance plan or policy of the government, which is not practically implemented or practically looked into. So what you said is very correct. Thank you.
Yes. Anak, is your answer correct? Is answer? Anak, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was satisfactory. That was satisfactory. I would like to have a small inquiry regarding it is the fact that sex workers is not binary, still it is of all genders. So it is not a question, rather what is it? Rather a comment that these sex workers are one among the deprived community where they are unable to maintain the social distancing, which is required at this moment, but and they are more prey to the COVID-19 or whatever or the virus that is there in the society. So if a policy would have been there to protect exclusively the sex workers, then they would have been more safe in the society. That's a comment. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Anak.
Problem is that in India we have like, though like the as part by our Indian law, though sex work per se is not a criminal offense, all other activities around sex work is still, like giving renting out your premises for the sex work, or living with the earnings done through the sex work, all other things are criminal. It comes under the trafficking law. So like sex work is not recognized by the government, though we have like Supreme Court commissions which says that women should not be penalized for doing sex work, or even soliciting clients on the public space should not be seen as a criminal offense. But still the state has not recognized sex work as a legitimate work that women do. So unless the work is recognized and the sex workers are given the status of a worker, uh, there is no the no way in which state is going to protect the sex worker. All the issues related to the sex work is still being considered under the rhetoric of rehabilitation, whether they want it or not. Rehabilitation is the mainstream rhetoric which addresses the issues of sex work. So that's a big problem. And as you rightly said, that sex workers are one section of the society who are deprived of livelihood during the COVID pandemic. And like surprisingly, in for example in Chennai, in many part of the country, sex workers group are actually coming together, offering their services during the COVID pandemic, saying that this was an ability that they had gained during the AIDS pandemic, through their community learning that happened in how they managed the AIDS pandemic, how they were able to spread the news, how they were able to bring the behavior change. So we have that expertise, and they are asking that they should be utilized in the governmental measures in controlling the COVID pandemic as well. But the problem is that we don't want the people, like the marginal people, to take the center stage. So they are always should remain at the marginal status itself. So their knowledge is not considered as important while preparing the strategies. So they are the laborers, and their labor is not recognized also. So that's a kind of bind in which we are falling into.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So now there's a question to Petra ma'am from Dr. Rajesh sir. Sir, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Sir, are you there? Okay, yes, sir. Yes, sir, continue.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're
Uh,
audible.
my question for the first speaker was that she talked of structural factors leading to gender inequality, and then she talked about exclusion. But can we understand gender based exclusion by not looking at the other kind of exclusions which are prevalent, like we have rural urban divides, we have class inequalities, we have caste system, and regional divides also. So I think gender can be understood if we look at the other intersectionalities also. So this is my question.
Sir, question is to Reshma ma'am.
Yes, yes, yes.
Reshma ma'am, please continue.
Yeah, that's very true. That's something that I left out when I was speaking. Like, unless we take into consideration in the intersectional issues that is there in analyzing like any sort of discrimination or exclusion, whether it is gender or whether it is caste-based inclusion exclusion, or whether it is the class-based. So these intersections are very crucial in understanding the violences and the abuses and the deprivations that any person might experience. And it's also very crucial in understanding the resistance also, what sort of resistance, what becomes very crucial for us. So for example, the issue of, like, when we're talking about the patriarchy and the issue of home and family, many of the white feminists or the savarna feminists in India might have talked about the home as a space of violence, and hence you have to demolish the home or family first for the women to become free. But the criticism that was raised against it is that for example, people like bell hooks, who raise the criticism, says that of course home is a place for violence for women, but as a person belonging to a racial category which is discriminated against and marginalized in United States, home becomes the only space where we can regain our dignity. In the public space where we are abused and disparaged and ridiculed, home becomes the only place where we have a sense of respect. So how do we actually go about demolishing that one little space where we feel that we are being human beings. So these kind of like intersectional issues are there, and we should surely give attention to these intersectional sort of issues. Only then we will be able to that's why I said like empowerment and gender inequality, it cannot be a very broad umbrella category or an umbrella understanding or an umbrella strategy or theory. We have to go to the very specific groups and see what is working with them, and we have to listening and understanding how these kind of different kind of social structures, whether the structure of caste or the structure of region or language or money, or like you enumerate disability or sexuality or gender, all these, and how also they reinforce each other, and how they work to create a grid of power relations, social relations within a space. And only if we understand that can we actually start thinking about gender equality. And thanks for pointing that out. I agree with you totally.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, I think, sir, is she answered the question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Very
sir,
much.
sir,
Thank you.
sir, do you have a question to Petra, ma'am? I find a question in the chat box.
Uh, she talked about physical violence and sexual violence against women, but there's a
Yes,
lot
sir.
of verbal violence also, because if you look at the different for women and men,
Ma'am, can you
what about
hear?
sexual very much there.
Oh,
It is
hey, I can't. They're all just
chaos.
the sound is being blocked because there are
Okay,
too many people that are engaging both video and audio. So
okay, ma'am.
the connection is very weak. Can he ask
Okay.
questions in the
Yeah,
chat, please?
yeah, and sexual violence against women. But there is a lot. Yes, yes. Because if you look
So
at
can
the
you
different
please
kind of
put it in the
abuses,
chat box? I'll read it out. Sir,
so
so can you please ask a question once again?
yeah, very much. Thank you. I have two small questions, and but there is a lot of what about psychological violence and verbal violence? And secondly, in many culture, many regions, due to socio-cultural attitudes, so uh, so
I
how
think,
deal with
sir,
that?
sir,
Because
I think your audio is breaking, so it's not very much clear. So if it is possible to just text in the chat box, it will be fine.
okay, okay, okay. Uh, because I was just referring to yes, yes, yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So, we have a question from Dr. Saji, sir. Sir, can you please unmute yourself and ask a question? Saji, sir. So your audio is not so clear. So, okay, I'll read out the question from Saji sir. Why women are not able to empower themselves? Why they need assistance from other systems? What is your thinking? Can anybody answer from the resource persons?
Yeah. I will try to answer that question.
Okay, ma'am.
It's not an
Thank you.
issue of women asking anybody to empower them. That has never been an issue. Like, women are not asking anybody to empower them. Actually, women is against the paternalistic attitude of the state, which tries to protect them, which creates agendas for women's empowerment. There has been demands made by women and people of different gender minorities for a long time, like in Kerala, in India, and all over the world. So women has been demanding, women has been agitating for different kinds of rights. So you have different strands of feminism, starting from women demanding to the state, for the creation of new laws to enter the existing inequalities. You have women taking up different kind of knowledge production activities to understand and address the issues. The issue is not about women asking anybody to empower them. The issue is women are demanding that the society and the state should not block their entry into the public sphere, should continue perpetuating institutions and structures which create violence against women. And so if these could be taken
Introduction
into
करीब announcement
consideration, and
करी
for
अपन
that,
क्या
to
क्या
address
करते
these
हैं.
issues, there is like something which has been happening for for generations, for a long time. And in order to change that issue, there need to be a political will and concentrated action by everybody in the mm, society, because
Yes, ma'am.
though the power structure is unfavorably biased towards the condition of the women. And so it's not an issue of asking for empowerment, it's an issue of demanding to be heard. I think
Okay,
Petra
ma'am.
might also want to add something.
Petra, ma'am, can you please just add on?
Hey, okay. Well, I agree because we are not asking to be empowered. We are trying to empower ourselves. The problem is that we are just, besides everything aforementioned, asking to not making that empowerment of our own even harder by everybody else. That is my short opinion on the subject. And I would like to kindly ask everyone to write in chat, or I will give you my email to answer questions, because there are too many of us engaging audio and video at the same time. Zoom really can't handle it. I got experience with this platform, so internet connection from you here to me here is constantly breaking, and it's not that I cannot understand you, I really cannot hear you. I hear only noise, mostly noise. So your voices are robotizing, and so I'm really sorry, but please write in chat. I'll give you an email. I'm absolutely into answering all of your questions. It's just not possible properly like this.
Okay, ma'am. I think there is one question from Dr. Rajesh sir, which he tried to convey before. I'll read out the question. You just answer it. Okay, ma'am. Is it fine?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. Let me read it. And
Yes.
oh,
A
you
lot
don't
of
have to. Okay, so regarding the verbal and psychological violence and the underreporting of cases, I actually answered in chat, but never mind. What I wanted to, when it comes to that, very much of these cases, primarily of domestic violence, are not reported, and we know it because women as men think that it's a private thing, and they are actually not putting it in public because of the social cultural factors you mentioned. But when it comes to verbal and psychological violence, I have to say that we police does notify us about these cases more and more often in the last few years. I can say as working in Center for Social Welfare, but the problem is actually our judicial system. We do have conventions, we do have policies, we do have legislative framework, but there is still too many prejudice in judicial workers. So we also have to educate our judges and lawyers to recognize these forms of violence as very serious, with very serious consequences, so that they can be addressed properly and punished adequately. Because we can see that judges are giving warnings. Okay, that's like some first measure that's being taken. When it comes to alcoholism and addictions of all sorts, they sometimes do send people to institutions, psychiatric hospitals, and etc. But the problem is that most often when there is violence present, even physical violence, they are given, financial measures. They have to pay a fine and that's it. You know, like, is that an adequate punishment for some act of violence? To pay, I don't know, 1,000 kunas, in that's still our money here. I don't know, 100 and some euros. Uh, People pay that, men pay that, and that's where it ends. Only after continuous reporting it, evidenting the cases of violence, uh, uh, we come to certain more serious measures that are given by certain judges. So that is, in my opinion, a crucial issue here in Croatia. And how to further gender sensitize the law enforcement agencies, judiciary, and society at large. Well, what I already said, primarily, I think it's about the education. My humble opinion is that we.
Okay, Petra. I think, yeah, you have answered it very nicely. Thank you, Petra. So now our Vice Chancellor is trying to join the meeting.
Okay.
So we can listen to him. Actually, because of some technical difficulties, he can't join the session. But sir is joining through my phone. Okay, so sir will speak now. Hello, sir. Yeah, yes, sir.
joined the webinar because of the critical flow. But I'm very happy to see that so many people have participated in this important international webinar on gender equality and inclusive development. I'm very happy to see that the scholars at the international level also have contributed to this very important theme. Gender equality is a major theme that affects almost all the countries, but most particularly post-colonial societies. Especially the fact that the gender factor and historically gender was divided or class-wise, and therefore the conventional patriarchal mode of production and male-dominated society has given great injustice to women development. Actually, 50% or more of the population constitutes women, unless they are empowered, unless equality cut across gender, social development will not work. This has been a major problem for many of these developing societies, and a country like India has a series of issues related to that. In some of the regions of our country, the situation is much more difficult and complex. But in certain areas where education has advanced, social development has followed it. In a state like Kerala, where the universities are faced, social reform movement pioneered this reform, and as a result of which women got reasonably very good education and also reasonable respect in the house and the society. Even then, we cannot say that Kerala has absolute gender equality. In many societies in India, women are discriminated. Motherhood is also discriminated. In terms of education, in terms of marriage, property given to women, a whole lot of exploitation exists. And as a result of which, women were completely sidelined. A lack of proper education, lack of proper awareness, and proper orientation, and eliminated them historically from certain sectors. With the arrival of independence, things have improved. But unless the society takes the leadership, radical reform will not work. Formal development from the part of the government, assurance given from the constitution, of course these things are important. But unless voluntarism takes place and people participate in a interest manner and appreciate the value of gender equality, the question of empowerment will not work. What we consider as inclusive development is development shall not be centered, it shall not be bifurcated between gender and military, and then further it shall not discriminate between male and female. So inclusion is important. All sections of society should be part of this sector, and particularly women. We rightly argue that if a woman is educated, the whole family is educated. Which means that the first child gets educated, the entire family gets educated. So that way, women development and women equality is crucial to the key engineering and social development of the system. So in a post-colonial society, this is very, very important. And unless we achieve all these things, the real spirit of democracy cannot work. It is not just a question of economic equality, it's a question of social equality. And that gender equality should work in such a way that women should be given reasonable space at home, in the office, in the school, in the college, in their workplace, wherever they are, so that ultimately their contribution to family and social development will be remarkable. And we have to work very securely for that, and that is why the debate on gender equality and women empowerment and inclusive development has been given top priority. In a state like Kerala, because of social reform movement, actually this debate must have already come, I could not participate. I'm sure that you will be aware of the fact that even the lifespan of Kerala women is close to 79 years, almost 80 years, ahead of that. So which shows there are reasonable health development. gender equality matters. I wish all success for this very positive seminar and for all of you are enlightened by the debates, particularly by national and international scholars. I thank all of you. Although I could not come to the screen and talk to you, I am very much there and I appreciate the leadership taken by the Department of Social Work and the University of Kerala in organizing this seminar. A very great pleasure to be operating. Thank you very much and wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So, sir was trying to communicate with us regarding the different aspects, dimensions of gender equality and the status of Kerala, how it was working out in the previous era and at present how it is, and how we can overcome the disparities which can reach up to the standard of the international level. So that was trying to communicate through phone. So there was some network problem, and sir was not in the station now. He's out of station, so was not able to join the meeting live. Uh, I'm really sorry for that, but I am happy that sir has joined with us, and also all of you are listening patiently. So thank you so much. Over to Agila.
Thank you, ma'am. And I also thank our VC, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Kerala, Dr. Gopalkumar sir, G. Gopalkumar sir, for having with us even through the call. So I very much thank sir. So moving on to our interaction session, we have a question from Smita, and the question is to Dr. Reshma. Gender inclusion in public spaces is still a huge issue during traveling or even this migrant exodus. Sanitary arrangements in public places for women is biased. As a person associated with gender studies department, are you mooting some demands on this problem, like free public toilets, next menstruation leave in workplaces? Any suggestions on that? Over to you, ma'am. Reshma, ma'am.
First of all, I am not from a gender studies department. I am from a social work department. But still, that's an issue that all of us should be addressing. And uh, uh, and it's not the people belonging to the gender studies department alone who are to take up such issues. Actually, the issue of public toilets has been raised by, if you will remember, the female textile shop workers in Kerala, in Kozhikode. They staged a long protest demanding public toilets, so that and also toilet breaks during the work hours, because the women actually had to do without going to toilet, and toilet breaks through the whole day they are working, which actually starts from 8:30 till in the morning till 8:30 in the night, because it's more than 12 hours often, and which also led to many others. So the demand for public toilets has been made by women, working women in Kerala, and it has been raised again, like we were doing a like a mapping of the female footpath vendors in Alapi district, and they were also talking about how there were public toilets in many spots in Alapi town earlier, which later became unusable, and then without any maintenance it's kind of broken, and they were unable to use, and they were also demanding public toilets by the demand for public toilets were made by the women. So different sort of women are making the demands for public toilets, and it is uh, like all of us should actually join along with them and demand for this public toilet. Like many of us will also have faced a similar issue while traveling throughout Kerala using the public transport system. The inadequacy of clean and sanitized public toilet system, and of course, so it's not just the people belonging to the gender studies department who are to take up this issue. But if we are talking about public toilets, and that too, we also have to talk about the gender neutral public toilets. In Kerala, we don't have gender neutral public toilet system anywhere, because there are issues of violence and abuse that is also associated with the toilets, and so women are afraid to use gender. But there was this very like very interesting experience that happened in two higher education institution in India, in Mumbai, in IIT Mumbai, which I would like to tell now. In IIT Mumbai, they were actually trying to bring about gender neutral public toilets, and the women scholars in the university actually oppose that move, say that we don't feel safe to have like the gender neutral public toilets. And so after like negotiations, like female students at last agreed to have gender neutral public toilets within IIT campus. And so they were asked to pick up spots where they would feel safe to have these gender neutral public toilets, and the spots that they picked up was within their faculty places, that near to the classrooms, near to their faculty rooms. And they didn't want to have gender neutral public spaces near the canteen or other public spaces within the campus. So when they were asked why it was so, they said that because these public toilets near the canteen is also used by other men, that is not men who are not belonging to our class or caste or community. So actually, like what we discussed earlier about the intersectionality, that can be seen here as well. Like female students in IIT were saying that like in effect they were saying that we feel safe with the women of our men of our caste and class, but we don't want to share a toilet with men of lower caste or working class men. So those sort of things are still there in the issues of public toilets. So it's not a very simple sort of demands. We have to address all these things while we are talking about public toilet. And next, about the menstruation leave, I am a bit skeptical about like whether it will bring back the older kind of like women who are menstruating should not enter into the public spaces. All other religious based thinking that is related to the menstruation and women's situation, whether it will, because you also have menstrual activists now who talk about celebrating menstruation. So that is one stream of how we approach the question of menstruation. But there is also the other section about like most of the issues regarding women's health is not seriously researched into it. Just a very few, so all the difficulties that is associated with the menstruation, all the health difficulties that is associated with the menstruation, and the remedies for those health issues, all kind of mood swings or the pain and cramps and blood loss. So all these things are not like there is a lack of serious health intervention and health research regarding all these matters, which is considered to be women's problem. So that should be, that lacuna should be addressed. And I think instead of asking for leave, we should start asking for how these issues, how more serious research into women and women's health should be taken up, and how policy should be made to address women's health issues.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you have explained it very beautifully. Now, I would like to read out a question. I don't know the name, it's not mentioned. How about oppression on gender by the state is termed, and how the advocacy becomes sometimes selective in a country where the women face the burden of harassment, crisis, jailing of activists, and branding the women from minority as threats? Can any of the resource person take up?
If Petra is
Ma'am.
okay, then since it is about our country, then I think I am supposed to answer that question. Like my problem is that to whom are we asking this question? Like the question is about advocacy becoming selective, right? So do we actually presuppose that there is a certain group of people who are supposed to take up advocacy on all issues? if we are going with any such kind of conviction, then I think it's high time we disabuse ourselves of such convictions, because there is no group who's going to take up advocacy for all matters. So like it is like it is our responsibility to take up advocacy on those issues that we feel is of primary importance, and it's our responsibility to garner support for those advocacy. But as you rightly said, the advocacy also relate to our social position. Like the person who is taking up the advocacy will prioritize certain issues as very primary to his or her existence, and those will be the issues on which the advocacy will be focused upon by that particular group. So if we think that these issues are the issues that are crucial to us as being sidelined, then it's our responsibility to raise that issue. And there is also another like as there is also something very correct in what you said, because like often the issues of minorities, like we are living in a very liberal sort of public sphere, and for the liberal public sphere places itself as judge. And so the liberal public sphere can hear to the cries, pains, and violations of other marginal group, and we will like sympathize with them. We will even say which of these issues are correct and which is not correct. So liberal public sphere constitute itself as a sort of judge, and so the minorities who are having to raise the issue have to uh, combat with this judgmental attitude of the liberal public sphere to bring up its own issues. So that's very much there. So those who are taking up these issues will have to fight not just with the state, but with also with the liberal public sphere at the same time. But saying that, I will have to say that the state violence that was that is raised by the state, it was actually the feminist group who in just after the emergency, when the people who were branded as the extreme left activists, Naxalites, were jailed. It was a feminist who organized the other like the right based activists, and who actually started demanding for the that the state take up action into the right violations that are faced by the political prisoners, including the Naxalites. So it's sort of a kind like we are asking for the state to take up measures to combat the violence, to measures to combat the rape, but we are the feminists are also the persons who are asking the state to take steps to stop death penalty. So we have to it's a sort of kind of like we have to talk about both the people at the same time. We just can't expect somebody else to do the battles for us. We have to do our battles and demand that others pay attention to the battles that we are fighting and align with us.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I would like, since it is running out of time, I would like to end up with one more question. That is from Dr. Sajimon. Uh, Ma'am, can I read out? Yes, I think I'll read it out. When we evaluate the recent crime records, it seems women turn against women and committing many criminal acts, rape assistance, and brutal murder. How you explain this in the light of gender? So I think Petra ma'am, can you just answer that question?
Well, I actually asked another question because I'm not familiar with these statistics. Are these recent crime records in your country, or because I'm not familiar with that raising statistics on violence between women, women acting violent towards women. So can that be specified a little?
Reshma ma'am, can you just add on with the points? Ma'am, you are in mute, ma'am. Please unmute yourself.
Uh, I was scrolling through the question. Which was the question? Like, women turn against women and committing many criminal acts,
Yes.
rape,
Yes, ma'am.
assistance. Okay, okay, right. I don't know. Because like we are actually talking about stereotyping of the women that is happening. Like, who, like, on the one hand we have the stereotype of women as the absolute, like, absolute epitome of purity, of innocence, of goodness, as angels. And like, so who's creating the stereotype about women? Like, how can we say that all women are absolute angels? Or like, women as human beings have their own interests, their own fallacies and fallacies. And they and actually the acts of rape and other criminal activities, they're also expressions of power also. So like, rape is often used not just for like sexual gratification. It's also kind of like, especially in India, it's often a statement about power relations. Like, I have the power to subdue you and use your body as I seem fit. And if by inflicting violence or pain, then that be it. So that's not, there is no democratic sharing of feeling and intimacy in an act of rape. So that also means it's also an expression of power. So like, only if we keep in ourselves this stereotypes about women, then we are surprised that how women can commit any such acts. Like, if we do away with any such stereotypes, then women as any other person is capable of committing all these sort of criminal activities. So it's not just on gender alone that we have to think about these issues. So each case, each brutal criminal acts should be viewed separately and analyzed. Like, we also, like, in the communal riots that happened in India, women actually gave like weapons to the hands of their men and asking them to go and kill the uh, minority groups or any other religious group that is like that they perceived as against them or opposite to them. So
Yes, ma'am.
it's not yeah, so we should look into other kind of things also.
Yeah, okay. So, on the verge of conclusion, I think if Petra ma'am, do you have something to add on?
Yes, just shortly. I agree with Dr. Reshma on this. And I have to add that in Croatia, we only have some statistics. Well, it's not the subject here about pure violence among girls when it comes to term of violence amongst women. But the point is that, of course, we're not saints, and but the main thing is that we are not talking about that sort of violence here. We are talking about gender-based violence, and we know how to recognize it, and we know how to research when we are really dealing with gender-based violence. I wanted to add, there was some question when it comes to policy participation in public offices, etc. I have to say that we have one interesting moment here in Croatia where the bodies that are, since the elections are coming shortly, uh, the bodies that should be keeping track of the equal representation of women and men on lists of political parties are, they gave a statement to media that on some lists there isn't enough men. Can you believe that? And the fact that there is continuously not enough women is not even mentioned. So there were some consequences about like raging women in public about that, but that is the state that we are in still. And I wanted to thank you all. Thank Dr. Reshma for everything. I'm really glad to hear your perspective and the huge efforts you are doing as women and there in India. It was a really great opportunity to participate in this with you all. I hope we did make a little small step forward to gender equality and to inclusive development. And I hope we will continue working on reaching some better situation for women all over the world. You in your context, and we in our context here in Croatia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And Reshma, ma'am, do you have any conclusion?
No, thanks. Thanks a lot for giving this opportunity, and thanks, Petra. To like, it was so refreshing to hear such a well organized and unlike me. And like as you said, like we can be we can build bridges like across countries, because these are and this is especially a time when we should be like, even if we are denied the opportunity to hold hands, like metaphorically at least we can hold hands and see how we can overcome the situation. And thanks Jilly, and thanks Akila for so well coordinating the sessions and making the session possible.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, both of the resource persons, Dr. Reshma Bedraj and Petra Alavasic, for being with us and having a great session with us. Now, I think we have gained and exchanged our perspectives on gender based differences in status and power, and considers how such discrimination shapes the immediate needs, as well as the long term interest of women, men, and also LGBTIQ plus community members. I thank you all for having a great participation over time. Now I request Dr. Jilly John, Head in Charge, Department of Social Work, Central University of Kerala, to present a small token of appreciation to our resource persons. Ma'am, I invite you to take over. Please go online, ma'am.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to all of you seeing together, because we able to come together through this particular platform. It was really wonderful experience for me, and I learned a lot of new lessons also. And there was some difficulty faced with lots of individuals who were trying to get access through the to the Zoom platform in the beginning, because unexpectedly the number was so high, we were not able to allow everyone to get into the platform. That was we never thought of it, and everyone was trying to get access to the Zoom. Actually, there was another option of YouTube channel, but everyone was not utilizing it. They just tried in the first option, so that created a little bit difficulties in the beginning. And even our vice chancellor and registrar was not able to get in the beginning. So and as they were not in the station, it created some difficulty for them. It's everything is technical only. So I think all of you will bear with the inconveniences. And now it is time for actually, while we are conducting a conference, a conference in the seminar hall, usually we were trying to provide a memento. So that will be a note to remember about such an experience, how you were. But in this platform, while we were thinking about in the beginning, it was very difficult. But I was very particular about it. We have to provide the memento. They have to keep it with them, and they have to display in their office room. So that will be really wonderful. So it's already prepared. The digital one moment we prepared, and we are handing over to the resource person. So it's just not that we know that it cannot be concluded that just with a memento, but that through that memento we were trying to communicate what the culture of India, culture of Kerala. Maybe Reshma is very much aware about it, but I am sure that Petra is entirely new to the culture in the one end of the world. So it's the first time you are having an interaction with someone in Kerala, someone in India, maybe. So of course you will remember it all through the time. And I request Aguila to just display that memento which we are trying to hand over to Miss Reshma, Dr. Reshma and Miss Petra. So we will send it to your mail ID, so you can, because there is no other way. So this is the memento which we prepared for the resource person. It's really from the bottom of the heart. We prepared it. The department has prepared it. It includes the festivals, the cultural contest of Kerala. I think Reshma knows about it. So maybe we are handing it over to you, both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think both of our guests we are overwhelmed to have you with us today for this international webinar on gender equality and inclusive development. So we are coming to an end. I invite Akila KP Research Scholars, Central University of Kerala for Thanksgiving. Ma'am, please go online.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello,
You are
Kila. Am I
audible.
audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
you are audible. Continue.
Respected Chair, Dr. Jilly John and Dr. G. Gopakumar, our Honorable Vice Chancellors, Central University of Kerala, and respected resource persons and all those dignitaries who have attended this international webinar on gender equality and inclusive development. It's my pleasure to extend heartfelt gratitude to all those led and benefited out of this noble endeavor. The international webinar on gender and inclusive development offered a space to meet, talk, inspire, and collaborate with like-minded people. It was in its true sense an opportunity as we envisaged by the organizers here. Now we all are reminded of gender in its true sense, I think. At the outset, I extend deep felt gratitude and indebtedness to Honorable Vice Chancellor who have inaugurated this webinar on gender equality and inclusive development. He is a visionary who respects all, irrespective of gender, caste, and creed. And it is his visions all this great center for learning and research in Central University of Kerala. On behalf of the department, I thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
And hello,
Hello.
continuing.
Okay.
Dr. Jilly John, head of the Department of Social Work, is the masterbrain behind this international webinar, and her farsight approach gave flesh and blood to this ever relevant topic of discussion. And she, being the icon of empowered woman, needs no introduction. Thank you so much, ma'am. And we have the resource persons. They are the social engineers that gear the thoughts of the participants here. And we had two knowledge-filled and inspiring resource persons. Dr. Reshma Bharadwaj, head of the Department of Social Work from Head of the Department, Shankara University, Kaladi from Kerala. She has dealt with the topic gender equality and COVID-19 outbreak, and ma'am has given and well presented the topic with utmost clarity, and she has already replied most of all queries as very well. And on behalf of the department, I extend heartfelt gratitude to you, ma'am. And our second resource person, this is the first time we are getting our online platform, an eminent social worker from European country, and Dr. Petra Lovasic, social work administrator and Center for Social Welfare and secretary, Professional Association for Social Workers in Rijeka, Croatia. And she has covered the topic international perspectives on overcoming gender disparities. And we have clear picture on the topic by her presentation, and it is my pleasure to extend heartfelt thanks in the name of all the participants gathered here. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I also make use of this opportunity to thank the professionals and LGBTQ activists and members and the faculty and the students who all are gathered here for all over India and outside the country. And thank you for your interventions, these interactions and participations in this webinar. Thank you all. And I thank our faculty of Department of Social Work, Dr. Mohan and Dr. Dilip Divakarji, and all other faculties gathered here. Very thankful to all of you, sir. And also, I wish to thank all the participants from Kerala as well as from outside. We have participants from Kashmir, Assam, Maharashtra, West Bengal, UP, Telangana, Chennai, Karnataka, so and so on. On behalf of the department, I thank to all your participations, and we have, as well as we have the other nations participants here from Pakistan, Dr. Shan, University of Sialkot, from New Zealand, and few more. I wish to thank on behalf of the department. Thanks to all, and at least and not at least, and these are students who are taking extra effort for this program as very successful. I thank all the master students and all the scholars of the department. Once again, thank you, and all who have attended this webinar and make it a great success. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. So before winding up, I request everyone to make sure you have filled both registration link and the feedback form, which is available in the chat box. Certificates will be provided for only those who have registered. So, gender is a set of characteristics which differentiate socially constructed roles and behaviors as either masculine or feminine, which are attributed to both individual based on their sex at birth. So, however, this clear cut differentiation leaves little or no room for those individuals whose gender identity does not match the gender assigned to them at birth. When we refer to gender perspective, we take an inclusive approach, considering the needs of every individual. Only you know who you were born to be, and you need to be free to be that person, stated by Ruby Rose. I would like to conclude this enlightening webinar on gender equality and inclusive development. Once again, thanking you all. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Petra. So in contact usual. Yeah,
Thank you,
you had
Jilly.
some difficulties in the beginning. I'm really sorry for that.
It's okay. It's okay. Next time will be better.
Yeah,
It was my first time as well. I was a little nervous, I have to admit, but we are
No,
still
the result was
learning.
really good. You prepared well. Everything was good because as it is first time and it's between the miles, lots of distance are there between us. So there may be some difficulties, of course, and you are not much aware about the situations in our place. So that is also will create some difficulties for it. I'm
It's
really
okay.
sorry for that, but that is
No,
nothing.
it's okay. We just cannot, impact the internet connection. It could have been worse. It was pretty
Yeah,
good. I mean, we are on two different sides of the world, actually, so it
yeah.
was okay. There were a lot of people participating, so
Yeah,
of course,
we
of
had
course,
we had lots of participants from different parts of the world, like UK,
yeah,
in
that
England,
too.
Australia, Dubai. In India itself, from different parts of the country, we had lots of members. So it was really good that all of us are coming together and discussing and sharing our views, perspectives, and maybe some of you, not one person's, everyone's view may be different. So that they are expecting, someone may expect something else. I don't think that is under our control. So it will be there.
No.
Anyway, I am really happy for being you as a resource person for the session. I think Reshma has already left.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really thankful to Dr. Reshma also. She was spending lots of time with us, both of you and all the members, because we started the session at 4 o'clock. Now it is almost 7. So
Yeah,
3 hours you spent with us. So it's really happy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe in future also we will meet with some other sessions, some other programs.